Hello and welcome to the introduction to JavaScript lecture. So let's understand what is JavaScript, then we'll try to understand what is the purpose of JavaScript and what kind of program you can write on the browser. Okay, in a simple word, JavaScript main purpose is to execute program at the browser. You write some program on the browser and then you define some events like on a click of a button, on a mouse hover of something, and you basically change any element on the web page as well. So you basically have this scripting language available where you can change the elements on the page or you can add some actions on the web page. Well, all this started in 1990s where internet and HTML was booming up. People were putting their business online and then they're developing these websites. And in 1995, Brandon basically developed something called as JavaScript, and the main purpose of it was to change the DOM, that is the document object model. It's nothing but all your elements of the web page. When you say elements, it could be your tag or it could be an attribute or it could be your element, right? This, if you want to change that, then he developed something called a scripting, using which he tried to manipulate the HTML tags. That was his main purpose. And the main purpose of JavaScript today is to execute any kind of programs onto the browser. And there are many things that you can do with JavaScript. You can change the page data at runtime. You can validate the user by doing on the page, like when you submit a contact form, you want to validate whether the email ID is properly populated or not. Also, you want to show or hide things on a page based on the user action. You want to download and upload data in the background from the browser, animation effect. When sometimes when you scroll the page, the button basically fly from top or bottom or left. Those kind of animation effects can be handled with the JavaScript. You can also control the timer, like every 10 seconds you want to do a pop-up or you want to do some checks on the web page. You can do that via the JavaScript. And basically, from a history point of view, the Brandon basically wrote JavaScript at Netscape. Netscape was again a browser long time back, and the original name of JavaScript was Mocha, and it was renamed to LiveScript, then again back to the JavaScript. And JavaScript now is basically adopted by many of the browsers. So all the browsers that you have in the market basically can execute JavaScript program. Well, JavaScript is booming a lot. Then the main reason is you get to execute everything on the client browser. Typically in client server technology, all the requests go to the server and server executes the code. But here in JavaScript, you run everything on the client browser. The languages like Angular are really getting famous because they get to run on the browser and they basically can interact with the server as well, right? So that's why JavaScript is very famous. Let me show you what is the main purpose of JavaScript and what JavaScript can do on the web pages. Okay, so I'll give you quickly a few examples. Let's say you want to perform some operations when someone click a link. So let's say you want to add 2 plus 5. You click it, there's a pop-up saying 7. Then you want to calculate an area, right? So there are a couple of things happening. When you click, there is an event, and based on that event, you're doing some calculation on the browser, and then you're displaying some data. Okay, and also you want to find an element, right? There is an element here, text box element. When you type something like this is JavaScript, there's a program in the background. When you click this button, the program gets executed. That is a JavaScript program, and it's able to capture this data from this text box and showing it in a alert box. So let's say you have a form, you want to capture the name and the email. You click submit, you can see name and email. So you're able to capture the text name and also the text field, right? So this is basically doing some kind of validation, because now you know what data has been entered by the user. You can now validate it. Alright, the next thing is you can also update the DOM elements, like this is JavaScript. You can see as I'm typing, right? So on the event of typing this text box, I'm changing the text of this label, right? This is basically happening on the events based on this text box. So you can basically manipulate the DOM, means you're changing the text of the element in the runtime. Okay, this is all handled by the JavaScript from the background. Alright, and you can see the power of JavaScript, right? It's all happening at the runtime, right? It's all happening on this browser. There's no control has been given to the server and server is giving a response. It's all the program that you write in JavaScript executes on this web page. Okay, that's the power of the JavaScript. So there are many cases. Once you want to do some kind of operations on a click of a button, you can handle via JavaScript. You want to find an element and find what is inside that element, all the text, and then you want to validate. You can, when a click of a button, you can handle that via JavaScript. And also you want to capture the data before the form has been submitted and validate whether the data is correct or not. Even you can do that by JavaScript. And then obviously you can find any element and then try to update that element data via the JavaScript. Okay, so there are many use cases. We'll have a lot of fun learning JavaScript, and we'll write all these programs and understand how this has been written in JavaScript. Alright, so that's all about the introduction to JavaScript. I hope you got a pretty much idea on what we can do with JavaScript. Okay, so let's start understanding by writing JavaScript code. Alright, so that's all for this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one.